Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. Perhaps you've been looking for an oven for your sublimation crafts and you're confused about which ones to purchase. This video is for you. So I'm going to compare a regular convection oven that you might use in your kitchen, but we're going to use it for sublimation, to an oven that's intended for sublimation. So this is the PYD Life Sublimation Oven, and it's made specifically for your sublimation needs. I'm going to cover the differences between the two, why you might choose both of these for your needs in your crafting space. But first, let's talk about some safety. So sublimation is the process where whatever you've printed or your infusible ink sheet turns to a gas before it bonds to the polyester of your surface. Now during that gas phase, it can let off fumes and it can also get inside of something like your oven. Therefore, you never want to use an oven that you've used for sublimation to cook any food. So you will want a standalone oven if you're going to use an oven for sublimation. That means that yes, you can buy a convection oven off someplace like Amazon for sublimation, but you want to keep it in your craft room and only use it for crafting. You never want to cook food in it again, so mark it and label it as for crafting only. So now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about some of the features that you might look for in a convection oven or a sublimation oven. So first of all, you will want it to go to at least 400 degrees Fahrenheit, higher if possible. You will need those high temperatures for sublimation. You'll also want a timer on the oven itself, or you'll have to time it yourself with something like your phone. Now the best case scenario is that you get a digital readout on the oven that you use. In my case, this PYD Life Sublimation Oven has a digital readout. That's because, say for something like this mug, it calls for 356 degrees Fahrenheit for a certain number of minutes. In order to get 356 degrees Fahrenheit on this oven, which has a dial and I add thermometers to the inside, I just kind of have to guess. So I'm guessing kind of at the temperature around a little over 350, maybe that's 356. But with the PYD Life oven, I can set that exactly. So I do prefer the digital readout better. Now, can you get a convection oven with a digital readout? Yes, absolutely you can. But most ovens that are intended for sublimation have that digital readout already on them. The other thing when we're talking about timing of things that are made in a convection oven, it can vary because, say I heat up this little convection oven here, I open the door, what's going to happen? All the heat is going to escape. Then I put my blank inside. Say this mug right here calls for 6 minutes. I time it for 6 minutes. I pull it out. Maybe it's sublimated completely and maybe it's not because I've lost so much heat in the beginning. Now, the benefit of the PYD Life oven, because it's intended for sublimation, it actually makes sure it gets up to temperature before it starts that timer. So it waits until the temperature reaches back to that 356 degrees in the case of the little mug, and then it starts its timer from there. So that is a benefit of going with something like a sublimation oven. You could do that yourself with something like a convection oven, but you would need to watch your materials consistently. Now I also find that the cheaper the oven I get, so this one is a very, very cheap oven, the more hot and cold spots I might have. So in order to combat that, I've done a few things with this little convection oven. First of all, I put a thin Nomex pad over the actual grate that's on the inside. That's just because that grate has just a few rods on it, and those rods and in between those rods can cause hot and cold spots. If you put that thin Nomex pad over it, it kind of helps to even out the temperature. Then the other thing I did was purchase 2 inexpensive oven thermometers, put them on both sides in the back so I can tell which side is hot, which side is cold. And then for both of these, actually, I opened it in the middle and just did a quick spin. This one in particular, I make sure that I spin it and rotate it, but this one I just kind of turned it just a little bit. Now the PYD Life Sublimation Oven, instead of a grate that you put your product on, it actually has like a mesh basket. So I found that the hot and cold spots were more evenly distributed, so I didn't have to purchase anything else to put inside. The sublimation oven from PYD Life also heated up way faster, I found, than this little oven that I just found on sale several years ago and started using it for sublimation. Now, what are the benefits of purchasing an oven for sublimation? Like you've heard that maybe perhaps you want a sublimation oven. What are the benefits? The benefits are that you can make any size sublimation blank in an oven. as long as it fits inside the oven itself, right? So I have this really small little convection oven, and I might not be able to do like a huge dog bowl in it. It might be too large. However, I could do this large tumbler. I've done it in both of these ovens. And I could go all the way really small. So I could go even smaller than I've shown here. I could do like a little shot glass in these ovens. It does not matter what the size is of the sublimation blank. So unlike a press, I don't have to have a coil for each one of these sublimation blanks. All I need is the correct shrink wrap. What is shrink wrap? So no matter which oven you purchase, you will need similar supplies and you'll need to prep your blank in a similar manner. So let's take a look at the supplies and how to prep one of these blanks so you can see how it works. The supplies you'll need in addition to your sublimation tumbler are a sublimation print. So this needs to be sublimation ink printed on a sublimation printer on sublimation paper. I also recommend a heat resistant mat, heat resistant tape, a lint roller, heat resistant gloves, a heat gun, and a shrink wrap sleeve. So the process to prepare a tumbler is the same no matter what oven you have or what kind of tumbler or any other shape of sublimation blank that you have. The preparation method is the same. The shrink sleeve will just be different. So you can see that this one will approximately fit the tumbler I have here, but there are different sizes and shapes of these. So let's look at how to prepare this tumbler as an example. To start with, we'll remove anything plastic from the sublimation blank or wood, whatever. You just want to be left with the sublimation blank itself. And then you want to clean it well. So I just use a lint roller. You could also use alcohol wipe, rubbing alcohol on a lint-free cloth, anything to make sure there's no dirt or debris on your tumbler itself, or whatever sublimation blank you use. So I'm using a tumbler as an example, but remember, the benefit of an oven is that you can do just about any size and shape blank that you would like. And then we'll just wrap the sublimation print, and we want to hold it tight. So really press it down, make sure it's tight. Use tape to secure into place. Because this is a tapered blank, you might have to kind of bend your print a little bit because it's smaller at the bottom than it is around the top. So I'll just kind of make some small bends in this bottom portion. So this would just be on things that are tapered. If it's a straight blank, you would not have to worry about this at all. And now the sublimation print is on our tumbler and tight. So let's add our shrink wrap sleeve. So we'll just add the tumbler inside the sleeve. So the sleeve should open up. You just add it inside. And you can cut off any excess off these. So if you get sleeves that are too large, just trim them with scissors. And then I like to put on my heat resistant gloves, at least one of them, and have this sitting on a heat resistant mat. Then I'm just going to use my heat gun and it will shrink the sleeve to the tumbler. Your goal is to have as few wrinkles as possible and this shrink wrap as tight as possible in your tumbler. Now the tumbler wrap is tight, very few wrinkles on it, and now it's ready for our oven. So I'm going to go ahead and prep some more tumblers and then we'll take a look at how to heat these in the oven. I did want to note I do have to do a little something special when I use shrink wrap with something that has a handle, and I went ahead and put a short video of that up on my Instagram feed, and I will link to that in the description below this video so you can check out that video as well. So if you want to do mugs in your sublimation oven, that's the video to watch. Now we have everything prepped, let's start using both of these ovens and comparing them. I'm going to make the same 4 sublimation blanks with the same 4 prints in both of these ovens just to get an idea of how well they work. First, we're going to heat these ovens up, so you do want to make sure that they come to temperature and get well heated up before you start using them. Again, I do like the digital dials on the sublimation oven. It does make your life a ton easier when trying to come up to a very specific temperature. I also found that the temperature in the sublimation oven from PYD Live was more consistent than the cheap oven that I've been using for several years. Now, with the small convection oven from Amazon, I was only able to do the tumbler by itself. I could not add any other blanks to the oven at the same time. In contrast, with the PYD Live sublimation oven, I was able to do a tumbler, a mug, and a wine glass all at the same time. So the larger the oven, the more blanks you're going to be able to do at one time, which is a huge benefit. When you're looking for an oven, you might want to go a little bit larger. So once I came up to temperature, I just added my sublimation blanks that have been prepped with that shrink wrap. Again, it does depend on the size of your oven, how many objects you're able to add at a time. And I do usually rotate in the middle. So I usually about So about halfway through the time, I do go ahead and rotate. I have gotten into the habit of that with my convection oven. The PYD Life oven, I'm not sure if I would have to do that. I might be able to get by without it, but I did still do it in this case, so I would be comparing apples to apples. So for a time and temperature, just to let you know, I found the time and the temperature for all of my sublimation blanks on the listing for each of the blanks. It was 356 for 6 minutes for the wine glass, the camping mug, as well as the tapered tumbler. The glass tumbler, however, was 356 for 9 minutes, so I did do it by itself just because it had a longer time. I would always wear heat-resistant gloves when you are using a sublimation oven. It does make the entire process a lot easier. When the time is done, you can look at the outside of the piece and see kind of if it's sublimated correctly. So you should be able to see the sublimation print through the shrink wrap. So if you remove it from the oven, just really quickly, take a look, make sure you can see that sublimation print through the shrink wrap. If you can't, you can always add it back to the oven for a couple minutes, but you should be able to see the sublimation print. The quicker you remove that shrink wrap, the easier it will be to remove. Now, because I do a ton of filming, mine usually cools before I can remove it, so it is possible to remove after it cools. However, the hotter it is when you remove that shrink wrap, the easier it will be on you. So if you can remove it straight out of the oven using your heat-resistant gloves, it will make your life so much easier. So go ahead and remove that shrink wrap, then remove the sublimation print to reveal your gorgeous sublimation craft. Now let's take a look at the comparison between the two ovens and how well each done on each of our 4 blanks. Now let's take a look at these sublimation blanks up close, compare how each of the ovens did on each of the blanks, and see if there were any differences that I noticed. So with the large tumblers, I really could not tell a difference between the two, and I did them both at 356 for right at 6 minutes. I felt like the small oven did it in 6 minutes, but again, I had to do it by itself in the smaller oven, whereas with the larger PYD Life oven, I was able to put more objects with the tapered tumbler. On the wine glass, I did find that I needed to do it a little bit longer than stated in the convection oven. The PYD Life oven did it at the time stated. Again, it does that thing where it doesn't start the timer until it heats up again after you open the door, so I do think that makes a huge difference. However, both of the wine tumblers turned out about the same and look really great. For the camping mug, the one in the PYD Life oven looks amazing. The black looks great, the colors really pop, it looks great on both sides. Now, the one in my convection oven, I did it longer than it stated. I did rotate it halfway through, however, one side looks really, really green. So a green black indicates that the product itself is undercooked. So obviously I did not bake it long enough in the convection oven, and it did not turn out correctly. Now, I could probably play with that time and temperature and get it correct in my convection oven, but this is fairly typical of blanks that I do in my convection oven. Sometimes they work, and then sometimes I have issues on the first 1 or 2 blanks that I do before I dial in the time and temperature needed for my particular oven. Then I did want to do a glass sublimation blank as well to show you that it wasn't only metal blanks that you could do in an oven, you could do any materials. So with these glass blanks, I prepared them the exact same way as the metal, added them to my sublimation ovens, and they both look amazing. So these were actually 356 for 9 minutes, and I think I did it a little bit longer in the convection oven just because my convection oven generally takes a little bit longer, but overall they both turned out really, really great. I did this like watercolor floral pattern on both of them. And the blanks themselves were blue at the bottom before I started, so these sublimation blanks have a color at the bottom, or you can opt for a color at the bottom, which I really like. But they both look amazing and vibrant and great, even though I did them in 2 different ovens. So as you can see, I did notice some difference with my cheaper oven. Now, can you find a cheaper oven and master it and get your sublimation blanks right? Most likely. I will say with an oven, either way, whichever oven you purchase, you might have some trial and error. So for me, an oven does require more trial and error than say something like a tumbler press. With my tumbler press, I'm generally able to press it according to the time and temperature and get those really great results quicker. But with something like an oven, a lot of times I have to experiment a little bit with the time, with the temperature, and get it dialed in for my particular oven. This is where I encourage you to always keep a sublimation notebook. Make sure that you're writing down the time and temperatures that you use and what works for each sublimation blank. So the next time you go to make that camping mug, you'll know exactly what to put on there, and you won't have one that kind of turns out green if you're using something that might require a little more time than you had intended. So what I choose if I was shopping today. So I am going to drop links to several ovens that will work in the description below this video. If you're on computer, click show more to expand the description. If you're on mobile, click the arrow to expand the description or swipe up on the video depending on how you're watching. I'll link to several convection ovens that will work. This particular one I got on clearance several years ago. I do not think I can find the exact model again, but I will link to several similar ones that will work in the description below this video. You do need to make sure it's a convection oven so it moves the heat around. Then I will also link to the PYD Live Sublimation oven that I've reviewed today. So if I was purchasing an oven today, what would I look at? First of all, your budget. So what is your budget for your oven? And then compare that with what you want it to do. So do you want the ease with this oven of being able to set the time and the temperature digitally, have it heat up to that exact temperature, and have a little less trial and error? Then the sublimation oven might be for you if it's within your budget. If you want to get a little less expensive, you could probably find a budget-friendly convection oven, but be aware that you would need some things on the inside. So I recommend the 2 oven thermometers on the inside, as well as a Nomex pad across the grate, especially if it just has a few rods, to control those hot and cold spots. It will make your life quite a bit easier. Then be prepared, say I'm gonna do camping mugs for the first time, be prepared to lose maybe a couple of blanks with some trial and error with the time and temperature. Now you might not lose them in all cases once you get used to your particular oven, but I would say that with my convection oven, I do lose them quite a bit. I have over the years kind of dialed in what my oven needs to be, and it does take a little longer than usually the time and temperature that's noted on websites. However, I do get it wrong sometimes, so in the case of this camping mug, I definitely got it wrong. So I am always prepared to lose a blank or 2 if I'm going to choose to do it in my oven and not one of my presses. So if you're prepared for that, want to go the more inexpensive route, you can probably definitely find a convection oven that will work. But always remember, safety first. Never use your convection oven or your sublimation oven for any food once you've used them for sublimation. So I hope that helps you pick an oven for your sublimation needs. I do think an oven is a really wise purchase, especially if you don't have the budget for or do not want to purchase tons of presses. So they make presses for mugs, tumblers, plates, they make all kinds of different presses. If you don't want to purchase all of those, a sublimation oven is a great substitute that can do a ton of different sublimation blanks all for one purchase. So I do think a sublimation oven in general is a good purchase, and then it just depends on, like I said, your budget and how much you want to experiment when you do start a new sublimation blank. So compare those two, compare the options for both the convection oven as well as the sublimation oven, and compare sizes, right? So you could go way larger with this convection oven, that way you could get more mugs at a time, that way you could go with larger pieces, or you could get this sublimation oven from PYD Live that takes large pieces. You just want to compare your needs with your budget and make a decision on the best sublimation oven for you. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, drop down in the comment section, ask away. If you like this video, if it helped you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.